Hi, and welcome to this KismetKit quick lesson on how to make controls for your matinee sequences in Unreal Development Kit. This is a very simple implementation of a control scheme that'll let you fast forward, move to any point in your matinee sequence, or rewind, or even play in reverse. Here we have a very simple example of a matinee sequence. It's pretty much just a wheel that rolls back and forth. Or to be more accurate, it rolls from this side over to this side. And that's all it does. And if I just play this back at the default speed, you can see how slowly it moves. And the entire sequence, I can show you here. It takes about 67 seconds to get through. So quite a long time, and maybe you don't have the patience when you're creating a matinee sequence to watch it through in its entirety every single time. You might not have the patience to wait for it to get to a certain point where you want to check what you're editing. So these kind of controls can help with that, and they can help with other situations. Your matinee sequences, they might have a camera or they might not have a camera. Matinee is a really flexible and powerful thing, and it can do a lot of gameplay relevant stuff. Say this wheel had an actual collision on it. We could do all kinds of different things with it, like it could be turned into a platform that sends a person launching up in the air, for example, at different speeds, and that'll send you various distances depending on the speed you have set for your matinee sequence. So there's all kinds of things that you can apply this to. So I'm going to demonstrate for you quickly how it works. Here we have the play button. This begins our matinee sequence. Here's our reverse button, and here's the fast forward. This just increases the speed of the matinee sequence in small increments, and this decreases it by the same increment. So if we start by playing here, our wheel is rolling very slowly, and if I start clicking on this, it increases in speed every time I press it, and you can see the speed plus indicator there that I have connected to the trigger. Now I decrease the speed, and if I keep on decreasing it, the cursor will go all the way back to the beginning of the timeline. Consider that wheel as our cursor, and the red bar at the bottom, that's like our play bar, like you would see on YouTube. Now we are actually increasing our speed here, but it's going to take it a little while for it to get back up to a speed where it's actually moving forward again. And now it's doing so. Increase, increase. And now I've stopped it. Move forward again. Stop, reverse. So this kind of matinee sequence, it doesn't have to be something simple like that. The matinee itself can contain many tracks, many kind of characters. It doesn't matter how complex it is. These controls will work just as well. Next I'll show you the Kismet that we have set up for it. I'm not going to recreate this with you here, and that's why I call this a quick lesson. I'm just going to show you basically how it functions. First we have our matinee, which is the wheel rolling and moving across the screen. That's connected to this actor here, that's our interp actor. We have a variable for the player, which instigates the triggers. First we have to set up 3 triggers in our level, and then we create, like if I click one of them here, well actually no, that's not necessary. We don't actually need to create variables for the triggers. What we need to do is create a new event, a used event, and you see it's just like this. And then what we do with one of our triggers selected, we can assign it to the used event. And then what I've done with the Matinee is I've exposed some variables. I've tried with the force start position to see if I could instantly scrub it to different points, and so far I don't have that working yet, but I do have the play rate working. And with the play rate, we would begin with a rate of 1. That's like our normal play speed. And then for the different triggers that we have set up for reverse and fast forward, we would simply add a floating point variable, and we would increase and decrease that by increments of 1. And you can change that increment to whatever you want. So we have the base speed of 1. We set that as A in our add float. Then we increase or decrease that by 1. And then we bring the float result back and point that back to our play rate variable. So it automatically changes the variable as we trigger it. There's not too much more to it than this, except that we have to set some different options in our used events. Let's see here. First, by default, it has aim to interact checked, and that would mean that you can't use the trigger unless you're pointing at it directly. And we don't want that. We want it to just let you walk over the trigger, and then when you walk over the trigger, you press E. It's not going to trigger just by stepping over it. So we uncheck that. Then we would go down here. By default, again, max trigger count would be at 1. We want it to be 0, so we can infinitely increase or decrease the speed. We don't want a trigger delay. Everything else here is good. So we just want to change the max trigger count and aim to interact. And over here in the Matinee as well, we'll probably need to change some settings. Some of these checkboxes hurt or help how the buttons perform. I can't really remember which ones exactly right now, but you can take a look at my setup, see how I have it. So besides that, my implementation, it's with triggers, and by no means does that need to be the only way that you do this. You could certainly set up a HUD, like through Scaleform, for instance, and you could probably do it to where you have some input boxes or a slider. And I'm not certain exactly how the slider would be implemented, but like say if you want to do a speed change, you wouldn't need to have the triggers. You could just have one input box and you could enter different integers or floating point, whatever. I'm just going to demonstrate for you one more time what happens here. Oops. Guess I need to hit play first. But that brings me to another point. I mean, you can increase the speed big time before you start playing. Like you can do like this. Crank the speed right up, then hit play, and it's going to begin at that speed. And we can keep on cranking the speed right up. The bad thing is that I can't just hold down the key. I need to keep on mashing E every time I want the speed to increase. That's kind of annoying, and in that way it would be nicer if we had a HUD implementation of it, where we can just type in the number. Now if I would want to slow this back down, I really need to smack that key a lot. What? Come on. There we go. Alright. So that's a basic demonstration, and I hope this gives you some ideas of how you can implement your own. Thanks.